I quietly walked away after uncovering my wife's affair, which came after 3.5 years of marriage. A year later, my ex-wife, who had ghosted me, found a way to track me down. Having learned about her betrayal, I decided to move to the hills, seeking solitude. I'm not entirely sure why I feel compelled to share this now that I've moved on, but perhaps it could be of some help to someone else who finds themselves in a similar situation. In February 2018, I discovered the truth about my wife's affair. At the time, I was working a contract job that required me to travel occasionally, but I also had the flexibility to work from home when I was back. My wife held a lucrative position as a director in a technical sales company, and while the stress of her demanding job and my travel habits did place a strain on our relationship, I still perceived our marriage as good. I met my ex-wife 5 years ago at a cookout hosted by a mutual friend. We hit it off immediately, and I felt fortunate to be with someone as attractive and articulate as she was. Despite my rough edges, something about me seemed to appeal to her. After dating for about 18 months, we tied the knot and moved into a spacious apartment, setting our sights on saving up for a house. However, things began to shift after our first 3 years of marriage. Even though I still had strong feelings for her, I noticed she would often argue over trivial matters. When I brought up her late nights and frequent work outings, she would become defensive, insisting that it was just part of climbing the corporate ladder. She would point out that since I had my own travel schedule, I had no claim to question her choices. In truth, I typically only traveled for a few days every 5 weeks, and I offered to cut back on my trips if it would help. These discussions never really resolved anything, and looking back, I realize I was oblivious to her infidelity. Our declining intimacy and her late work hours seemed like signs of stress, and I mistakenly thought she was just tired from work. However, my ego took a hit when she continually rejected my advances. She usually worked from our spare bedroom, spending long hours there. By September 2017, I noticed that she began spending evenings out, attending work gatherings instead of coming home. What started as one night a week quickly escalated to 3 or more nights, and while I'm not typically a jealous person, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I understood that she worked with more male executives than females, and even if she seemed focused on her job, it was hard to believe she didn't attract attention. A month before the revelation of her affair, I had a fleeting suspicion when she made a quick stop at the grocery store one evening before coming home. I offered to help her with the shopping, but the whole situation began to feel off. While I was gathering a few things from the back seat of the car, I noticed something pink glinting from underneath the front passenger seat. It was a bra, unmistakably belonging to my wife. She had a preference for ones from a specific store, which made it clear it was hers. In hindsight, I realized that the bra was a significant warning. Whenever she felt particularly lustful, she would always remove her bra first. Watching her do that had always made me feel uneasy, but this time it hit me like a punch to the gut. Confused, I couldn't fathom how her bra ended up there. When I returned to the kitchen, Kathy noticed I seemed off, remarking that I looked like I had seen a ghost. I brushed off her comment, struggling to mask the torrent of emotions inside me. I decided then to determine whether or not she was meeting someone that night and the following day. I racked my brain for any clues I might have missed, but aside from the bra, I had no solid proof. Living in a large city while she worked in a downtown office, I chose to momentarily push my suspicions aside and focus on giving her more attention. One Friday night after work, I prepared a lovely dinner, complete with elegant plates, silverware, and candles. I even bought flowers and a nice bottle of wine. When she arrived home, she breezed in and immediately apologized, saying she had to meet coworkers at a local bar. She suggested showering first, indicating she'd only have a quick snack with me before heading out. At that moment, my silence spoke volumes. Inside, I was seething. I was tired of her neglect. While she showered, I impulsively threw my work cell phone into her backseat, hoping to track her later. Then, in a fit of frustration, I discarded the dinner and flowers I had prepared. When she emerged from the shower, looking as stunning as ever, she said, "All right, let's eat." I replied, "Never mind, go out with your friends." Surprised, she asked if I was angry. "I'm just hurt that you never want to spend time with me," I admitted. She reacted with sarcasm, chiding me for my emotional outburst, and I felt utterly defeated as I sighed. For once, I wanted to enjoy the evening together. Instead, she gave me a sly smile and left in a huff. After she departed, I pulled out my second phone to track my work phone. I followed her to a bar she frequented, where I spotted her car in the parking lot. Waiting from across the street, I felt like a voyeur, but justified it as a means to quell my anxiety. About an hour later, I watched her exit the bar with a man who seemed to be an executive from her company. He pulled her close and kissed her, and in that moment, my body turned numb and a knot formed in my stomach. They got into a different car together, and as they drove off, I instinctively followed them. You guessed it, they drove to a hotel just 10 minutes away. As I paused on the street beside the hotel, I watched them exit together, hand in hand, and enter. That was it? I felt utterly foolish. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel in frustration. Something inside me went completely blank. I don't know if it was an out-of-body experience or a complete blackout, but as I processed everything, I felt an overwhelming urge for a drink. From that moment on, my life took a direction I had never anticipated. I just started driving out of town, replaying the scene in my mind, tears streaming down my face, anger mixed with hurt, even though it was hard for me to admit it. After a while, I found a cozy little tavern on the outskirts, about 30 miles away, and pulled in. The bartender, a kind-looking woman, remarked that I seemed like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I could only respond with a half-hearted smile and said, "You could say that?" A man settled onto the bar stool next to me and initiated a conversation. Truth be told, I wasn't in the mood to talk, but there was something disarming about him. We started chatting, and eventually, I found myself sharing the story of my wife's infidelity. I told him all I wanted was to get away and forget her. "You're not alone, buddy," he said, giving me a reassuring pat on the back. "I went through something similar a few years back. There's a reason these things happen. Your life can go in a positive or negative direction from here. I promise you that." His words somehow shook me from my despair. While I was painfully aware of my heartbreak, I had always been a rational thinker, and he was absolutely right. We introduced ourselves. His name was Ray, and I appreciated his genuine, down-to-earth demeanor, even though he was more of a country guy. "When are you planning to move out?" he asked me. I hadn't really thought that far ahead. My instincts were screaming fight or flight, and all I knew was that I wanted to leave this woman behind. "I have a suggestion," Ray continued. "When the time is right, I have a mobile trailer on my property. It might need some work, but why don't you come check it out? You might find it a good place to stay for a while. I'll give you a fair price, and you can park it on a nice piece of land I own. It could help you escape your situation." I took a moment to consider his offer. If I had had the chance to escape my crazy ex-husband years ago, I would have jumped at the opportunity to live in a trailer just to clear my head. The bartender chimed in, having listened intently to our conversation. Maybe this was exactly what I needed, even if it felt surreal. "I'll think about it and come take a look," I replied to Ray. After some time, we parted ways, agreeing to meet up at his place in a few days. I started to feel a sense of perspective and a possible way out of what I saw as a terrible heartache that had become a nightmare. One thing was clear. I never wanted to be around my wife again. Cheating was something I found revolting, and it had always been the one thing I thought I'd never tolerate. That night, once Kathy returned home, I collapsed onto the couch. She came out and asked where I had been. "Where have you been?" I asked, turning to look at her. "I went to grab drinks," she replied. Directly, I asked, "Are you having an affair?" She seemed taken aback, quickly regaining her composure. "No, why would you think that?" I mentioned that I'd heard she might be seeing someone at work. "Who told you that?" she demanded. "Just someone I know," I said, keeping the source to myself. "You're being ridiculous," she countered, accusing me of being drunk and irrational, then questioned where I had been. "We're heading to a bar for drinks with friends," I stated. Although she clearly wanted to ask more questions, she chose to retreat to our bedroom and crawled into bed. With the realization that she had been deceiving me for months, I opted to sleep on the sofa. But sleep was elusive, my mind replaying images of her in bed with another man. I felt wretched, hurt, and disgusted with myself. Then Ray's trailer popped into my mind. That thought lifted my spirits like a revelation. I realized there might be something wrong with me, that I instinctively preferred to flee from the situation rather than confront it. The next morning, we hardly spoke and continued the weekend as if nothing had happened. A few days later, I arranged to meet Ray. When I arrived at his ranch, I was pleasantly surprised by his beautiful property and a 26-foot trailer that was surprisingly well furnished. It reminded me of a fun spring break trip in college. I handed over the cash for the trailer, tempted to take it right then and there. After he gave me directions, I explored the nearby ranch, which had picturesque biking and hiking paths surrounded by trees and shrubs. Ray showed me a small cabin perched atop a hill, complete with electricity and water access for the trailer, right near the mountain foothills. He assured me he would set up the trailer at the site for me. In the weeks that followed, I tried to get Kathy to confess, but all I received was gaslighting. I warned her bluntly that if I found out she was cheating, there would be no going back. This only made her dive deeper into her lies, lashing out at me in denial. I almost chuckled at how absurd it was. Regrettably, I hadn't taken any photos of them together, leaving me without solid proof of her betrayal. After enduring the emotional turmoil, I decided I wanted out of this marriage. Instead of discussing my feelings with Kathy, I began to quietly plan my exit. While she was at work, I started moving my belongings out of the apartment and into the trailer. At least this made me feel proactive. During this time, I noticed a change in Kathy. Though she was treating me more nicely, it felt like it was too little too late. I needed a break, especially as she continued her company outings. One night, I decided to get ready as she was leaving. Glancing my way, she asked where I was going. "Meeting up with some friends," I replied. As she began to probe further, I cut in, "You wouldn't enjoy it. You don't know them." This had been her usual response whenever I inquired about joining her on office outings. With a slightly hurt expression, she said, "All right, have a good time." "I definitely will," I replied. While working on the trailer and spending time with Ray at the bar, I began to meet new people. Being around Ray's amazing family and friends lifted my spirits. I decided to cut back on drinking, wanting to avoid any unhealthy habits. It would have been easy to drown in my sorrow, but I knew better. Kathy mentioned she'd be traveling for work the following week. When I asked who would be going, she told me it was the executive team and a few department heads. "I hope you have a great time with your boyfriend," I said, glancing at her. Instantly regretting it, I ignited a heated argument. As Ray had pointed out, it didn't really matter who her affair partner was. "What matters is that she chose to leave you," he had said. "She ruined the marriage, no matter how she tries to spin it. Facts are facts." Honestly, he should write a book for those who've been betrayed. I realized I had the perfect opportunity to move out while Kathy was away. During her trip, I gathered up all my belongings, clothes, laptops, and work equipment, excluding anything that belonged to her or shared items. Before I left, I wrote a short note. Initially, it was long, but I decided to keep it brief. I simply wrote, "I hope it was worth it," and placed it on the kitchen table beside my wedding ring. As I walked out, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders. I was free. Healing would take time, and I knew I'd have to deal with the emotional baggage, but I had taken the first step. I needed time for myself and wanted to discreetly remove her from my life. I didn't feel proud about not confronting her or demanding a confession. I had chosen not to yell or cause a scene. She didn't deserve that. She had tossed aside everything we shared. Our dreams of a future, a home, and a family. It was all gone, and there was no going back. I owed her nothing. She could face the consequences of her actions. I hadn't made any plans or contacted a lawyer. All I wanted was a fresh start and some clarity. The mountain air felt refreshing as I stepped into my trailer. I started running again the following week, and it felt amazing to be alive. While Kathy was away, she texted me updates like, "We just landed," and "We're having a team dinner." In several emails, she asked things like, "Where are you?" and "Why haven't you responded?" I chose not to reply. When she returned home, my phone was flooded with calls and messages. She kept trying to reach me, but I ignored her, along with a call from her mother on the first day. She didn't bother contacting my father since we're not close, and he's the only family member I still have. After a week of being ignored, her messages became increasingly desperate. One of her texts simply read, "What is this? We need to talk," she insisted. "I don't know what you think you know, but there's no affair." After a week of silence on my end, she sent another text, apologizing and saying, "I'm sorry things got out of hand." It didn't matter that I was involved with someone else at work. She had been distant while I was focused on my job, leading her to make a mistake she claimed she wanted to fix. I had been waiting for her admission, but instead, it only fueled my disdain for her. Why couldn't she just be honest? A future with her was never on my mind. Mistakes don't linger for 6 months, 8 months, or an entire year. Her pleas to reconcile became more pathetic over time. I continued to ignore her, even when she stopped messaging for a few weeks. I wanted to keep my life private. I didn't want her invading my space or disrupting my peace. Then one day, she sent some harsh messages. "You're a coward. You refuse to talk to me. You don't care about us. Come home so we can discuss this." "Where are you?" she asked. "I can come to you. Please, let's talk and fix this." Looking back, I didn't remember all the texts, but they felt like excuses lacking genuine regret. I let them pass in one ear and out the other. Eventually, I changed my phone number. In June 2018, I received an email from Kathy saying she hired a lawyer and was filing for divorce. I simply replied, "Okay, that sounds good." This prompted a flood of emails urging me to visit her. In one message, she claimed she would stop reaching out if I agreed to an uncontested divorce. I agreed, and a few months later, I finally felt free. After moving out, I didn't have to see her again. It seemed like she cared more about wrapping things up than I did, and neither of us found closure. I thought about her occasionally for a few months, especially when I'd hear songs we used to enjoy. However, eventually, I stopped thinking about her altogether. Now that I'm officially divorced, life is going well. I've met someone special. While running on the trail nearby, I helped a lovely girl with a flat tire, and we really hit it off. She's a few years younger, but she's wonderful and charming. She calls me her mountain man and loves my lifestyle. I'm taking my time when it comes to relationships, but I'm also not completely shutting myself off from women. For now, I have no plans to leave my trailer. I appreciate the outdoors and have streamlined my life, which has made things more manageable, especially dealing with the grief and my ex-wife. I understand that everyone processes these experiences differently. I'm fortunate that I was in my third year of marriage without children at the time. I believe I made the best choice for myself. You don't have to stay with someone who betrays your trust. If you find yourself in a similar situation, try not to dwell on it too much. Keep living your life, and things will improve as you work on yourself. I wish the best for everyone. I've worked on this piece several times to make it clearer, and I wanted to share an update about my ex-wife's situation. I was concerned that my ex-wife might be trying to find me, as I mentioned in my last post. I had moved about 2 hours away from our former home. Last weekend, I unexpectedly ran into her at a coffee shop I frequent in the nearby town. It felt too coincidental. Luckily, I was able to slip away before she saw me. In my latest update, I went shopping for groceries this past weekend and stopped by my usual coffee spot. I was using their free Wi-Fi to finish up some work when I wrapped up and stepped outside. Just as I was heading to my truck, I heard someone call out, "Paul." Turning around, I spotted Kathy across the street, waving at me. My heart raced as she hurried across the road toward me. I froze in disbelief. Expecting a hug, she reached out her hand. Instinctively, I raised my arms with my palms facing up to halt her. She looked visibly distressed. Then she said, "I've been looking for you, Paul. I wanted to see you since I heard you moved here. Can we talk?" I felt trapped, like an animal in a cage. After a moment, I agreed we could find a table to talk. However, when she suggested coming to my house, I firmly said no. We ended up sitting on a bench outside a small store at the end of the street. She started by commenting on how much I had changed and how she liked my new look, my beard and fitness level. Dressed in a tank top, short white shorts, and her hair in a ponytail, she was clearly trying to charm me. I had to stay alert. She was clearly focusing on rekindling some kind of attraction. She then apologized for her past infidelity, claiming that after I left, karma hit her hard. Her employer found out about the affair, which created a hostile work environment that ultimately drove her to resign. The man she had the affair with, who was engaged at the time, faced backlash and was transferred. When he blamed her for everything, she finally told his fiancée the truth, which led to his breakup. She lowered her head and started to cry. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, taking in my surroundings. After a moment, she straightened up and met my gaze. "What do you want from me?" I asked. She insisted that she wasn't planning to have an affair. What drew her in, she explained, was the company's dynamics and how her AP used his charm to sway her. She recognized that they were both taking advantage of each other. When I accused her of infidelity, she claimed she wanted to come clean. She burdened herself with guilt and started drinking after work to cope, admitting she felt ashamed and alone. It was as if her heart shattered with loss the moment I walked away. She cut ties with her AP immediately. Convinced she needed to find me to explore the possibility of reconciliation, she sought me out despite my silence. She yearned for a fresh start, even knowing we were divorced. I just watched her. Eventually, I confronted her. "You have no right to come here and undo the damage you've caused. Do you think I'll forget what you did to destroy our marriage? I've made it clear. If you cheated, we're done. There's no path to forgiveness. This relationship is over. You destroyed it. The moment you left, you wrecked everything we built together. Do you really think I'm that naive? One night, I saw you walk into a hotel with him. Did you know that?" My voice grew louder with my anger. She grabbed my arm and started crying. I let her share her tears for a bit before gently pulling away. "I deserve this." She looked up at me through her tears. "I really do. Can we at least go out to dinner? I just want to talk." "I'm not interested," I replied. "I want to be clear about everything. You need to invest more time with me than you have before. Please, Paul. I love you. I know you might not want to hear it, but before you walked away, I had no idea how much you meant to me. I've hurt you just as much as you've hurt me. I can't forgive myself, and I don't want to until I take my last breath." She began to sob deeply and struggled to catch her breath. I instinctively hugged her, feeling that it was the only way to comfort her. In that moment, I realized that I had broken her heart as profoundly as she had broken mine. Once she calmed down, I found a quiet spot to keep talking. "How did you know where to find me?" I asked, curious. "Did you hire a private investigator?" She thought for a moment before chuckling lightly and shaking her head. "No, it's not that complicated. A few weeks ago, I ran into Stacy and asked her how you were doing. She didn't mention she'd seen you, but I pressed her until she told me everything she knew. I know she was hesitant because I told her not to say anything, but I wouldn't let it go. Eventually, she revealed that you lived nearby and were in town. So, on her days off, I just came here to check on you." I couldn't help but laugh at her perseverance, thinking about Stacy not being able to keep a secret. She blushed at my reaction. We ultimately chose to have dinner at a quaint little restaurant with a patio. I was careful not to drink anything, wanting to ensure she had no reason to think she couldn't drive home. Surprisingly, we had a pleasant conversation. Afterward, I walked her to her car. She insisted that she hadn't seen anyone else since I left and passionately expressed that I was the only person she desired, urging me to stay longer. However, I made it clear that it was still too soon for that. Despite her pleas for me to come back, I didn't commit to anything. I gave her my new email address but remained silent otherwise. When she asked for my phone number, I told her I wouldn't want her to inundate me with texts and calls. She was upset by my response, but eventually, she accepted my decision. Before leaving, she promised to email me with details about returning to town the following weekend. I asked her directly if she would have forgiven me if I had been the one to cheat. After a pause for thought, she said yes, but only after seeing a marriage counselor and working through the healing process with plenty of discussions, perhaps even a binding agreement. I replied that maybe I could consider that in 5 or 10 years. She said she would wait if that was necessary. Then she took my hands, looked me in the eye, and declared, "God damn it, Paul, I will always love you and will do anything to prove it." Her words completely caught me off guard. Even after she left, her statements lingered in my mind and affected me deeply. I couldn't picture us getting back together, even though I was beginning to feel more at peace with the situation. At that moment, I couldn't see her as a friend. The thought felt uncertain. After returning home, I went for a long run, had a few beers, and contemplated how far I had come. I wished someone could reassure me that she wouldn't disrupt the sense of peace I had found. I had time to gain perspective, but the memories were still fresh. To sum it up, I ghosted my ex-wife for over a year before she reached out again. She wanted to make amends and start over. If you thought I would be the typical beta male who would forgive her just like that, you'd be wrong. Last week, she poured out her feelings of love and regret over the affair in a lengthy email, offering to visit for the weekend once more. My response? I shut it down. I made it clear that I had no intention of reconciling. I'm genuinely happy living alone, enjoying my solitude, and keeping things uncomplicated. At 32, I'm taking my time with any changes in my life. I have my own self-determination plan and have enjoyed the company of a few women and friends along the way. In my email response, I clearly stated that I had no intention of reconciling and chose not to share my phone number. I've lost trust in you because of the choices you've made. I genuinely wish you the best and maybe, in the future, we could be friends, but that's not going to happen right now. She seemed frustrated by my lack of clear answers and revealed that she accepted a job offer in another state. It became evident that her real aim was for me to join her, thinking my remote work would allow for an easy transition. She expressed a desire to start fresh together in a new place and wanted to meet in person to try to convince me before her move. Fortunately, I had a week of business travel scheduled, which gave me some relief. I'm thankful to be moving on from this chapter. Soon, she'll realize that our time together has ended, though I expect a few more emails from her. She'll need to find someone new, and who knows, she might even end up cheating on them. To anyone who reads this, make the most of your life. Let go of the past and find the strength to move forward. Wishing you all the best. Thanks for watching. If you love the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.